Hi everybody, I'm Stacy. I'm a registered nurse. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, welcome in. If you're coming back, I'm so glad to have you back. Let us talk about documentation. Documentation is really a critical part of nursing. It's the part that nobody loves at all, and there's many different charting systems. I have never worked in Epic, so I'm not as familiar with that charting system as I've worked in long-term care facilities and in home hospice. I have done charting systems such as Kinzer, Home Care Home Base, Point Click Care. I can't think of the name of it, but there was a charting system that I really liked years ago when I worked in a facility. It wasn't Meditech, let me tell you. I have experienced that only through, I can't think of the name of it, but it was a really good system. But I've charted on different systems over the years as a CNA and nurse. How did it start as a CNA? Paper charting. Paper charting is where we were when I started my career. When I became a nurse, we had binders with the patient's name on it, flip charts, where we documented on patients narratively. And then over time, they went to a checkbox type of charting for Medicare charting with a little narrative piece where a person only had to chart narratively once every 24 hours, and they could use those boxes for the other shifts. Narrative charting, I kind of loved it a little bit more because you wrote in the chart, you closed the chart, and you went home. But we switched to, I'm in the generation that started with the healthcare systems, and they were janky when they started. They were not great. They were not fun. And we think technology makes things easier, but when it goes down, if you haven't had experience doing paper charting, it is stressful when you have to do it. When we work in nursing facilities now, we have to do things like print out paper charts periodically that are updated in case of an emergency. You know, things like weather happen in the world. I live in America, so that's my example, but in America we have tornadoes, we have hurricanes, we have floods, we have earthquakes, we have wildfires, and all of those things can impact your charting. They can impact your internet service. They can, your system can get a bug and crash. And sometimes it can take days to get those things back running. And especially if you're in a hurricane, tornado, or weather situation, you may be without power. And you may be on backup generator, and you may be without internet, so you may be doing documentation the old-fashioned way. And so one of the things that I had to do as an assistant director of nursing in one of the facilities I worked at was ensure that all of our paper charts were up to date periodically. I don't know if we did it once a month, once every 3 months, I don't remember, but I remember that was really, we had to print all those things out, especially if we were in hurricane season and we anticipated that our power might go out. We had to start being prepared for those things. That was an interesting time for me, learning those things. I have been in tornado warnings and things like that over the years, but paper charting was first. Then we had our little systems come together, and Point Care was really the first one that I encountered back in the day. And it was really base. We still had to do some paper charting, but we started having some documentation, like our wounds were computerized, and the documentation for those wounds was computerized, and that was kind of nice. And our MARs and TARs, our treatment administration records and our medication administration records, were books with someone's name in boxes, and we signed our little signature in the box every time we administered the med. It had the medications on one side, and it had a signature box with the calendar numbers on it, and it also had a spot on the back to chart PRNs, and you would fold the chart over and flag it, and come back 30 minutes to an hour later and chart on the effectiveness of the PRN. Now they have, medication administration records and treatment records that are electronic, and that's kind of nice. That's kind of nice because you're not trying to, I don't know if you've ever passed meds on a med cart in a facility, but your space is already taken up with water, you're preparing pills, you have your bubble packs, and your space is limited. And then if you have a big chart on there too, you have your pill crusher. It's a lot of stuff. You have cups, spoons, applesauce, pudding, whatever it is you need. And when you worked night shift in some places, you also had super cereal and special laxatives that were like, there was special laxatives that were mixed up by the dietary department that had a lot of fiber in them. And you had to carry like different things on your cart to give people food if you had to give them medicine with food. But ice water was key on your medicine cart. Ice water and applesauce pudding and a little bit of food for some patients. We would keep crackers on there. You just didn't have room for a big book. Now you have a computer, and I'll tell you what, you have to make sure that computer's charged, because you need to be documenting as you go. This is something that I've always struggled with as a nurse, is documenting as I go. And I tell you, if you document as you go, you don't have to do as much at the end of your day. It's very hard to get out on time when you have to sit and do documentation. If you don't love documentation and you put it off, you're going to be having overtime. Companies don't want to pay overtime for that. They want you to manage your time. And if you're consistently not managing your time, you get a little talking to. Now, let's be real. In a nursing home setting, in a facility, in a skilled nursing facility, I don't know, maybe even in a hospital, because I've seen them sit down to chart at the end of their shift as well. You're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to get things done, and you don't always have time to sit at the desk and do charting. But if you can, chart in between what you're doing. I find that that makes your day much easier when it's time to leave. Of course, you're not always going to be able to leave on time. You have to give a report, you have to check labs, all kinds of things. But those charting systems were really nice. The MAR, the TAR, if you're doing those things as you go, you don't have to, you should be, when you're administering a med, doing your checks, doing your 6 rights, doing those things when you're checking your medications and administering your medications, and you should be signing them out after the medication is administered. Don't sign them out before, and don't sign them out at the desk. Sign them out as you go, because you are at so much risk to make a mistake if you don't. You need to take your computer system with you to pass medicines. You think you know what your patients are taking in a long-term care setting, in a skilled nursing setting, but doctors come in, they change orders, Coumadin orders change, and med errors happen that way. And I am a big, strong advocate for looking at the medications every time. Yes, we know what they're taking, but things change with our patients and things change with their orders. So it's always important to be checking those. And documenting, cover your behind, really. CYA, every time. If you didn't chart it, it didn't happen. It's a pain in the butt to sit down and chart something, and it's a pain in the butt when it's an added charting into something that happened in your day that you didn't anticipate. But when you're working in healthcare, things are going to happen that you don't anticipate, and you should plan for that. Just plan for that. You can have an idea of how your day should run, and you can have a plan for how you should be managing your time, but understand that your time is going to be impaired sometimes. There's nothing you can do about that. A good rule of thumb is to chart at the time that something happens, especially an incident. Especially an incident, when somebody falls, when somebody gets a skin tear, when something happens, if there's a complaint, you should chart those things at that time when the information is being presented to you, so that you don't have to go back and remember it, so that you're documenting it accurately as it's happening. Because I tell you, if you don't document when it's happening, you might forget something critical. And states and surveyors and public health and CHAPS and all of those things that happen, JACO and hospitals probably, if you didn't chart it, you didn't do it. And you know, they can call you into court later and ask for an account of those things, and you're not going to remember those things. So your documentation is the thing that's going to save you later on. It's the thing that's going to save you if you ever get called into a court hearing. I don't know that firsthand, but I have heard that secondhand from people who have had to be at a deposition, and it's frightening, and they will interrogate you. So it's really important that you chart as you go. In a hospice setting, I hate charting at the bedside, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel like it's very impersonal. But I've developed a habit of actually doing it at the bedside when I can now, because my home time is very important to me. I don't want to go home and do documentation, and neither does my family. They don't want me to come home. My husband doesn't want me to come home and bring my work home with me. I've worked my 8 hours, I've worked my 10 hours, I've worked whatever my hours are. I should be coming home and being able to be present for my family and not in my tablet at home. Now, if you take a management role, sometimes you're going to have your laptop and your stuff at home, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you accept a management role, you're going to bring your work home with you. You are. Not always, but your work is going to come home with you if you accept a management position, especially if you're a director of an assistant director or a director. If you're in a management role, you will sometimes take your work home with you, and you will take call more frequently. When you work in home hospice, you do take call. Not as often as you would take call as a manager, for example. And the call is a different scenario. But documenting things as you go is important. Conversations, incidents, things that happen as they happen. And I will tell you, I have a really good memory. I can remember things that are important for a long time. I can remember small details. I'm really weird, like everything's happening all at the same time in my memory bank. But even knowing that I have a good memory, there are times when I'm sitting in a home and I did not ask a question that I needed to ask. And you can't remember something that you didn't do. And so you can't answer that question honestly if you didn't ask it. And it could change, right? Your documentation is not going to stay the same every time. It should not be a copy-paste scenario where things are never changing in your documentation. You need to be asking those questions again, because I don't know about you, but there have been times where I thought I knew that my patient was diabetic, or I knew that my patient had hypothyroidism, or I knew something specific that did not apply to that patient, and I mixed it up with another patient. So it is always important when you're at the bedside that you're looking at the diagnosis, that you're making sure you're aware of the medications your patient's on at that time, and that you're asking those questions as you go. For your assessments, it's good to do your assessment in real time, because then you don't have to go back and remember it, and you don't have to write yourself 50 notes because you're doing it in real time. And that is the beauty of having electronic systems, is that you can do it in real time. You don't have to do it later. And it may seem like it takes more time at the time that you're doing it, but when you get used to doing it, you'll find that it's taking you an appropriate amount of time, and that you're not getting out as late, and that you're not spending as much time doing it at the end of your shift. If you chart something when it happens, you remember it. But the thing that happens in healthcare and in nursing is that emergencies happen, unexpected things happen, and then you forget to chart that thing that you were going to chart later. And then something happens, a patient dies, a patient falls, a patient goes to the hospital, and you didn't chart that thing and it was critical. So it's really important to do your documentation. Can you tell I've been in management? I'm sorry, but I promise you, I apply those same principles to myself. I'm not telling you something that I'm not doing, and I have not always been great at charting. I hate charting. I hate it. But I have found, and I have gotten myself into a habit of doing it in real time, that it saves me time and it gives me back my time at home. It gives me back my time to be home and present with my family. I don't want to take my work home, and I don't want to stay over. I don't want to stay over. They used to try to make us clock out in some facilities when we would have to do our documentation. So it's really important when somebody has a fall, when somebody has an incident, not necessarily a fall, if there's an encounter, if there's an argument, if there's a complaint, if somebody has a cardiac event, if somebody has something that happens that's critical, that's a change for them. You always want to notify the doctor, the family, do a good assessment, and document it. You want to document it. Because I will tell you, I've been in facilities where a person did not document, and a facility will receive a IJ, an immediate jeopardy tag. And it is not fun if a facility gets an immediate jeopardy tag. The surveyors, the public health department will be up in your business for days and months until you get it corrected, and your company's administrators and managers will be up in your business for days and months. So always cover your butt and always do the right thing. If you make a mistake, report it. If you give the wrong medicine, if you give too much of a medicine, if you do things if you mess up, own it and report it. Do the necessary things that you have to do, because in the long run, depending on how serious it is, some of those things could be reversible. But if we don't take ownership for the things that we do in healthcare, for mistakes that we make, we don't learn from our mistakes, and we don't prevent them from happening again. If you make a medication error, you usually know you did. You usually know you made a medication error. And it's really critical that you call the doctor and take ownership of that mistake, and that you call your supervisor and take ownership of that. It feels really bad when you make a mistake. It feels really bad. I have given the wrong dosage of insulin. I have given short-acting insulin instead of long-acting insulin when I was distracted at a cart. And I knew it the second I did it. And it felt horrible. I thought I was just going to die. I felt sick to my stomach. I had to call the doctor. I had to be vigilant with that patient for the next several hours, because we know insulin peak times. And that patient, family, nothing came of it. She was okay. She was okay. I've talked about this before. But I felt terrible. But if I didn't own up to that mistake, I will tell you that blood sugar did drop, even with me feeding that patient every 30 minutes to an hour. I was giving that patient so much sugar, so many candy bars. Verlichta. Oh my goodness. I was giving that patient so much sugar every 30 minutes. The nurse practitioner happened to be in the building. That was our medical director's nurse practitioner. She had worked there as a nurse. She was always in the building, present. She had her own little office there. I said, you know, I gave so-and-so R. Maybe it was Humulin, but I gave the wrong insulin. I meant to give Lantus, and I gave short acting, and it was something like 20 units. It wasn't a significant amount in the grand scheme of things. I've given 14 units of R to a person in an emergency, but I felt so sick having done a mistake. But I am so glad that I took ownership of that. Did I get a warning? Absolutely I did. I got a written warning. I had to sign, or a verbal. Maybe I got a verbal since it was my first mistake, but I did have to take ownership of that. I had to call the family and say, hey, I gave your mom the wrong medicine. She was fine. She was angry at me, and rightfully so. She did not want to see me again for the next few days. If you make a mistake, you need to take ownership for it, document it, and put it through the right channels. Speaking from experience, because if you don't and something adverse happens, it's still going to come back to get you later, because it will be discovered. It will be discovered. If you do something wrong and you don't admit that you did something wrong, it's going to be 10 times worse. It's like when your mom tells you, okay, but if you lie about it, it's going to be worse. It's the truth. It's going to be worse. When you're doing your Medicare charting and you're doing your assessments, the beautiful thing about ClickBoxes is that you can do those assessments at the bedside. You can do them in real time, and you don't have to think about it later. Obviously, there are times when you can't chart at the bedside, clearly. Clearly, there are things that happen when you're working as a nurse on the floor that you didn't have in your plans for the schedule for the day. You know, you got 3 admissions, or you got, 2 people fell in the floor, and one person had a cardiac event. And in a skilled nursing facility, you're still sending them to the hospital for acute care. Because in long-term care, we can manage a lot of things. We can manage some critical things, right? We can give IV fluids, we can give IV antibiotics, we can do a lot of treatments, but when it comes to emergency medicine, that's not the specialty in long-term care. Also, in a home setting, you need to be paying attention to your documentation. And I think when you're doing 5 or 6 patients a day and you have documentation, our supervisors were saying to us, you're in the home, we see when you're documenting in your home, we see how long you spent on documentation, and if you would have just spent that amount of time in the home, you would have been done with your documentation. And I started really thinking about that, how much it really took me to do my documentation on a stable patient, on a patient that wasn't on a lot of different things and their symptoms were well managed. The documentation was taking me maybe 20 minutes. The visit sometimes only takes 15 minutes. If it's a person that doesn't have a lot of wounds, it doesn't have a lot of changes happening, what's 5 extra minutes in the home to complete that documentation and not take it home with you? It started making sense to me and clicking. I even do my admissions at the bedside. I stay in the home, because I'll tell you what, I didn't do that before. But if you do that, you don't have to come home and do all that documentation. In home care settings, when you're doing an admission, you can document in your car when you're finished. Sometimes you're allowed to document at home to finish the finishing touches, to add the meds in or whatever. But honestly, I have even found that doing an admission, if it's not a complex admission, I can get it done in 2.5 hours with documentation. And it depends on your charting system too. Home care, home base, some people love it, some people hate it. I love it. I think it's user-friendly. I used to do Kinzer and I didn't love it, and I would procrastinate on my charting because it would take so long to do it. But even they would say you should chart at the bedside. And what I realized is charting at the bedside is the fastest. It really is. And I love not having extra stuff to do at the end of my shift. So if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. If you don't document it at the time it happens, you might forget about it. If you make a mistake, own it and talk about it with the correct supervisors, because I promise you that it's better to own a mistake than to try to cover it. And it's critical in healthcare to make sure that you are doing the appropriate interventions if you make a mistake. You can say it can be the difference between life and death. So if you make a mistake and you know you made a mistake, absolutely report it and document, because if you didn't document it, what? You didn't do it. What are some things that you have, some tips and tricks that you have for getting your documentation done? How do you feel about documenting? Do you prefer paper charting? Do you miss those days of paper charting? Have you ever done paper charting? Or what systems have you used, and which ones do you love and which ones do you hate? I'd love to talk about it in the comments and share more. If you have any things that you would like to ask questions about or know more about, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you like what you see here, then I ask that you like, subscribe, and follow for more. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.